Now I have a question for you. What will you do if you had a full ride scholarship for your undergraduate degree? What will you do? Second question is, what are you willing to do now to make that happen for yourself? I'm here talking with Natasha.
When I was in high school, I never thought I would come to the US for studies.
I think we met in 2020, and again, 2020 was my year of meeting a lot of new people with full ride funding and scholarship to the US. So I will let her introduce herself, say where she's from, what college she's going to, and what she's studying. Over to you.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Natasha Mulenga. I am from Lusaka, Zambia, and I currently go to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, and I'm studying physics with a minor in computer science.
Did you hear that? She's studying physics, the most dreaded subject, at least to me though. Alright, so now let's rephrase back to your plan and what you did prior to coming to the US. Did you always think you were going to be here for your undergraduate degree, or what did you think? What was your plan?
When I was in high school, I never thought I would come to the US for studies. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. I kept changing my mind. I wanted to go to South Africa, to Namibia, to the UK. I had a different answer every time anybody asked me.
Mm-hmm.
And so because I was never sure, after I finished my 12th grade in high school, I went on to do A-levels at a different school because I was planning to, go to the UK. But I only did that for 1 year, and afterwards my dad suggested that I try doing the SATs and applying to the US. So I had never considered that as a possibility, but I was open to the idea.
Okay, so your dad suggested it. What was the difficulty level like for you as you thought about it?
When I first started, so when my dad suggested this, he enrolled me at an SAT college prep center where we had lessons to practice for the SAT before taking the exam. So it was a bit different for me when I started taking the lessons because it was not the same as the English and math, the English classes I'd taken in high school. So it took a lot of practice to get used to how the exam was structured and to get good at answering the questions.
Okay, so when you say it took some time, how long are we looking at here?
So I started taking my lessons in January of that year, and I sat for my exam in May. So about 4 or 5 months.
Okay, 5 months. So would you say that's like the average time that a person would prepare? Like, what's the average time in your understanding? Or at least now that you've been there and out and talking to other people, what's the average time like for studying?
That's a difficult question to answer because in the US, I know students practice for the SAT while they're in high school, but where I'm coming from in Zambia, that's not part of our system. So everybody who I know has did it after they completed school. So a lot of people do it for 5 months, 6 months, and actually a lot of people take it multiple times.
Okay.
So it ranges anywhere from, I've seen some people take it in as little as 3 months. So it just depends on how comfortable you are, whether you're happy with your score when you write it, and so on.
Okay, so how many times did you take it? Multiple times?
No, I took the SAT reasoning. So there's the SAT reasoning test, and at the time I was doing it, there was also the SAT subject test. So I took the SAT reasoning test once, and I was happy with the score I got, so I didn't retake it. And then I also took the SAT subject tests afterwards.
Which other subjects did you take?
I took math level 2 and physics.
Okay. So do you want to share your SAT score, what it was like for you?
Yeah, sure. For the SAT reasoning test, I got 1540 out of 1600. And yeah, this is about.
Oh my God. Okay, so 1540 out of 1600. Did you see that coming? Did you think your preparation level was enough to land you that kind of score in that range?
I don't remember what score I expected to get at the time I was writing the exam, but I remember being very comfortable, especially with the math section. But with the English section, I knew I had practiced a lot of the areas that I was weak in, but I knew there was also some possibilities that I would run into some tricky questions in the paper, so I wasn't really sure what to expect.
All right. I'm thinking back at that exam just because I never took it anyways, but I know a lot of people talk about how difficult that test was. Now, I think, what would you say the role of that test was in pivoting you to where you are today?
I think the main thing that I learned during the preparation for that test was adapting to a new style of exam questions and learning, because it was, like I mentioned before, it was different from what I was used to from high school. And it also taught me to find different strategies for learning techniques, because I was in a place with a lot of different students and we exchanged tips and techniques that we used to practice for the exam. I realized I had to work a lot on speed and then doing things in the most efficient way possible. Those are some of the things I learned while preparing for it.
Okay, so you worked a lot on speed and efficiency, right? If you had to advise someone about taking the SAT today, I know that the SAT is not a big deal anymore. It's not as big a deal as it was back then. But if you're to advise someone who wants to take the test and get a score that seems similar to what you had or somewhere around the environment, what would be your step-by-step advice?
The first thing I would say is master the basics. If it's math, there are some SAT preparation books out there. Make sure you know the basics of each topic. English, it's the same thing. Make sure you know the grammar rules and everything. And then once you have that, you can now work on the actual practice tests. I would say do a lot of practice tests. I used the website Khan Academy. It has free resources. I used that a lot to practice. Skipping questions when you're not sure of the answer and then going back to them later on will save you a lot of time. And also, one thing that I did a lot was practicing with reduced time. So each section has a specific amount of time that you're given in the exam. So when I was practicing, I would cut down the time for myself and try to finish it in a shorter amount of time, so that I knew that when I had the full time to do it, I would be able to finish everything before.
Okay, so you practiced a lot. Like, you use Khan Academy that has a lot of free resources. You practice with reduced time, right? You talked about knowing the basics, like grounding yourself properly. Did I miss anyone else?
Yeah, no, those are the three main
things. Those are the three main things. All right, so what was the application process like, if you think about it, aside from the SAT?
The application process was actually the hardest part for me, because first of all, there was a college search process, because there's thousands of universities and colleges in the US. So getting to know what these colleges are, where they're found, what's offered there, what the differences were, that took a lot of time, like researching and trying to figure out what I would be interested in and what I was not. And also looking for places that would provide financial aid, because my parents told me the only way they were going to allow me to come to the US is if I got full sponsorship. So I had to look specifically for places that would cover that. And after that, I would say the biggest challenge was writing the essays for the applications, because I remember when I was applying, you had to write a personal statement for all of them. But apart from that, all the schools had their own essays that you had to write. For some schools, you had 2 or 3 extra essays, some as many as 5. Maybe. And it just takes a lot to write, because they're very different topics. You have to be thinking. Sometimes it felt like I didn't have anything to write about on a particular topic. So it just took a lot of brainstorming and talking to people and looking for ideas. So I would say that was the hardest part of it.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. But then it looks to me like your parents were supportive upfront about you going for the prep, and you didn't seem to encounter any form of difficulties along the way in terms of support, in terms of finances or anything like that.
For finances, I know I wanted to apply to as many schools as possible to increase my chances, but the application fees were expensive when you converted them from dollars to my currency. So what I did was I looked for schools that provided fee waivers so that I could apply for free. Even for financial aid applications, I looked for places that I could apply to for free. There were a few that I had to pay for, but I tried as much as possible to reduce the cost, so I paid for almost none of them. And I would say also a big thing was the SATs themselves were a huge cost, so I didn't want my parents to have to pay for it multiple times.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you prepared well. You didn't want your parents to pay multiple times, and then you looked for schools with fee waivers and things like that. What other thing do you think contributed to your success coming to where you are today in the application process?
I would say the main thing that contributed was the friends that I worked with during that time.
Okay.
Because almost the entire year, from January until the end of the application cycle, I spent it going to that SAT center almost every day. And it was almost like a full-time class or job, if you will. And the reason I found it very beneficial to go there is there were a lot of other people who were doing the same thing as me. So it just helped to keep me motivated. It helped share ideas. When someone would find out about a particular college or resources, they would share them. So I would say that was the major thing that helped.
Okay. So being around these people of the same mind, the same goals, the same aspirations. And I'm sure that there are many people who will be watching who would you wonder, is there an SCT center close to me? What can I do? It might not be readily close to you, but again, the internet is out there, right? There's now more WhatsApp groups, there's more Telegram groups, Facebook groups that you can actually lean in to get information from and then move your chances forward. Now, what was specific about the scholarship you got? Was there anything you did differently that made you get the offer you got? And what was the influence on your choice of college?
So one thing I learned during the application process was there were different types of funding. And the main differences were there were need-based financial aid. So these are schools that provide you with financial resources depending on how much your family can afford to pay. And then there were merit-based scholarships. So these just depend on what grades you had in high school or what SAT grade you had and your extracurricular activities and so on. So I applied to schools that offered both types. But the school I currently go to, which is Rollins College, offered me a merit-based scholarship. So when I had applied the first time, I was invited for an interview weekend to be interviewed for this full scholarship. So I had to travel here to the States for a few days, and I went through a series of interviews, and after that I was offered the scholarship. So the scholarship that I got was merit-based.
Okay, so you received a merit-based scholarship. Did they specify what definition of merit was? Is that just by the score on the SATs or just a combination of your application holistically?
They used a holistic method of evaluating. So they considered all my grades in high school, the recommendation letters I submitted, my SAT scores, the extracurricular activities I was involved in, just everything that was a part of my application.
Okay, that's fine. Now, when you walked out of that interview session, did you know at that time that you were going to be offered the scholarship, or did you get back home before you were offered the scholarship?
I had to travel back home, and it took about maybe 2 or 3 weeks before they released the decision.
Okay. What was your frame of mind and reference at that time when you were waiting for that decision?
I remember being really worried and scared because I felt I had tried my best during the interviews, but at the same time, I wasn't sure how the interviewers perceived me or whether they were impressed enough or not. And I was just really worried because I didn't want to feel like I had traveled all this way to go through that whole process and then not get it in the end. So I was very nervous.
Yeah, that must be really nerve-wracking. Did you prepare for that interview? when you were invited for the interview, did you make any efforts to prepare for the interview?
Oh, yes. I was very scared of going through the interview process, so I made sure I did everything to prepare for it. So I looked up common interview questions, scholarship interview questions, and I remember like getting a whole collection of them and thinking of responses I would give in each circumstance. And like, of course, when I was going through the interviews, it wouldn't be the exact same answer I had planned for because they would ask it in a slightly different way. But because I had looked at so many different ones and thought of different cases, I at least wasn't completely blank when I was asked questions.
All right. I mean, that's fine. Did you receive other like acceptances? Did you get rejections? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, so I applied to a lot of schools, maybe 24, 25, and I received a lot of rejections. But I also received a few acceptances. It's been a while, so I don't remember, but maybe 5 acceptances. But the main issue was I didn't receive full funding from all these other places, and I only received 1 full offer. And like before, my parents said they weren't going to be able to cover the amount that was left in the other schools that I've been offered admission to. So that's why I ended up covering.
Okay, but did you receive some scholarship, like maybe part scholarship in some of the schools?
Yeah. So all the other schools I was accepted to, I received partial scholarships.
Okay. All right, and then you chose the one, obviously, that you were fully funded for.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. Now, I know we picked Natasha from the airport the day she arrived. She arrived very late that night. What was your mood? What was running through your mind as you were making the second trip down to the US with the lockdown, COVID and everything? What was in your mind?
I think there were a lot of things going through my mind at that time. At first, I was excited because I was happy to be going to a new place because the year was 2020, so the whole year practically we'd been on lockdown. I spent a lot of time at home. I wasn't really doing anything much outside of home, so I just really wanted to be able to start school and move. And also, I'd started the semester virtually back home. And because of the time difference, all my classes were very late at night. And it was just a lot of issues. So I was happy to finally be in the same place. But at the same time, it was scary because COVID was still going on. A college also wasn't operating at full capacity. Most people were still virtual. So it was just a mix of a lot of different things.
Okay. Well, that's fair. What would you say your living situation was like? Was it like as you expected? Because your scholarship covered your room and board, right? What shocks did you experience as you got here? Maybe living situation, academics. What were the major pointers for you that made you sit up a little bit?
So when I came here, I was living on campus, so I moved into a dorm. Because it was COVID year, nobody had roommates, so everybody was in an individual room. Okay. So I had a room to myself. There were very few people on campus, so I rarely ran into anyone around. One of the major things I had to get used to was the food, because I used to eat in the dining hall on campus. So it was just it was a bit hard to have to start eating very different foods all of a sudden. Yeah. And it took a while to like acquire a taste for it. And then also classes, because my college is a very small college. The classes are deliberately kept very small. And it was a big shift from like my high school classes and any other class situation I'd been in before, because now the professors were very much engaged and they expected all of us to participate actively in all the conversations. Like, you couldn't just sit in class and just listen. Like, I had to have something to say. Right. It didn't matter what class it was, like I had to have something to say. Okay. And I remember, for example, I couldn't basically the professors were just always aware of everything that was going on. Because I remember one of the things that was surprising in like my first year, there's a day I was late to class, maybe by 15 minutes. And when I got to class, my professor hadn't started the class, and she said, "Oh, I was so worried. I was about to text you. I was wondering why you hadn't come to class." And it was just so shocking to me because I didn't expect them to be like.
You didn't expect your professor to wait for you for your class. Okay. All right. Now, were you always the smartest bunch in your class when you were back home in Zambia?
I don't know. I feel like that's kind of hard to answer because both in high school and even when I was doing my A-levels, there were always like a lot of very smart people in class. Like different people were good at different subjects. So, yeah.
So how do you see the difference when you moved over to Rollins in terms of academic performance, in terms of pursuit? How do you feel people were trying to be competitive or not? What was that like for you?
I feel like in college, when I came to Rollins, I didn't feel like there was as much competition as there was back in high school, but only because back in high school, for example, when we'd get test results and everything, they would be shared with everyone. So everyone knew what other people got. But here, there's a very big emphasis on professors keeping results confidential and everything. So even if you get your results, sometimes depending on how they post the results, you'll be able to see what the highest got and what the lowest got, but you wouldn't know who got what.
Okay.
So you could just tell what the average is and whether you're above or below the average and so on. So that spirit of competition, I would say, wasn't as strong as it was.
Okay, back then. Okay. Do you think that your academic curve was steep, or you feel it was a gentle curve for you to climb where you took a moment to understand the material, or did you just find a stark difference between maybe your A-levels and college?
I would say, to begin with, Rollins is a liberal arts college, so I had to, when I did my A-levels, I only took math and sciences. But when I came here in my first year, I had to take non-science related classes. I had to take epistemology, sociology in my first year, art history, and so on. So all of these subjects are subjects I wouldn't normally enjoy taking because it's a lot of writing and so on, which is something I don't really enjoy. So it's something I had to motivate myself to be good at. I enjoyed my math and physics classes more, but also I had to learn very fast how to adapt to the way of doing things here. For example, I didn't realize for a long time. I knew that professors had office hours, but I just assumed I had to go there when there was like a big issue that I had that I needed to solve. So I never went to office hours at all until I realized my professor talked to me towards the end of the semester, and she said, "Oh, I noticed that you don't come for office hours," and I was confused because I was like, "Oh, I have to go." And then I realized that other people in my class were going consistently. And it's just a way of like going to talk to your professor more about the contents in class and all of that. So it's something that I realized a bit late in my first year that I had to be doing.
Okay. All right. But then you felt confident in your abilities. Maybe you were studying, understanding the material, so you didn't think you should venture to the professor.
I mean, yeah, I was understanding the material, but also I was running into problems. For example, we had, in my introductory physics class, we had weekly problem sets that we had to do. So even when I ran into like a really difficult problem, I felt like I had to figure it out myself because I thought that was my only option.
Right.
Since that was what I was used to. Back from high school and A-levels. But then I learned that, wait, actually, I'm the only one who's doing this. Everybody else in class goes to the professor to discuss the concepts extra if they're struggling with a problem. So I just didn't know that was an option I had.
Okay.
So,
all right.
But once I started doing that, things became a lot easier.
Easier for you. Okay. So, well, let's shift gears a little bit. How has your interaction with your family been here for this long? How has that been so far since you've been here?
It's been, I don't know. None of my family is in the US. So ever since I came in my first year, I've had to just communicate with them mostly over the phone. So I used to be I used to talk to my family almost every day when I first came. But over time, I think it grew less frequent, but I still keep in frequent contact with my family. I've only been home once to visit since I came here. So at first it was really hard because I was not used to being away from home for so long, but I think I adjusted to it.
Okay. All right, that's fine. So let's see. What are your goals going forward in the US?
So currently I'm in my final year. I'm supposed to graduate this year.
Mm-hmm.
And my plan is to go to graduate school.
Okay.
So I'm currently in the process of applications to graduate school.
Yo, this girl is a nerd. Okay, just take it from me. Okay, that's fine. So what are you looking at in terms of graduate school?
So I'm planning to study medical physics. Yeah.
Have you heard that before? Medical physics. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been applying to mostly PhD programs, praying and hoping for the best in that.
She's praying and hoping for the best to go to a PhD program, medical physics. Okay, so you guys look at your future medical physicist. All right, so what other extracurricular activities did you participate in? Because a lot of international students come to school, they're so bored, they're sitting down, not doing much. Or I don't know, at least in the initial time, they just came. And then it came in COVID, so what extracurricular activities did you participate in?
That's a good question, because when I started the whole application process to the US, that was the first time I actually had to sit down and think about what extracurricular activities I was actually doing, because it was a whole section on the common application where you have to list every extracurricular activity you've been participating in throughout high school, how many hours you spent on it per week.
Ooh.
And when I saw that, I was like, what am I going to put in here? So I started thinking about what I had been doing other than school, over high school. And one thing I did was I was in the church choir. So, and it's not something I really thought about at that time, but when I had to put it in the application, that's when I started thinking about actually how much time I spent going to rehearsals and all of that and putting that in. And it was actually a significant amount of time. Okay. Also orchestra, because I used to play the violin in high school.
Mm-hmm. So let's reframe. She was in the church choir. What church do you attend? We're going to bring it out. This one.
Deeper Life Bible Church.
She's a Deeper Life girl, you. All of you. So, I mean, all of you that go to the choir, youth choir, children choir, orchestra, play the violin, play the trumpet, play all those things you do. It's just the amount of hours you put in church as a Deeper Life member. You sing on Sunday, sing on Monday, sing on Thursday, Friday, Global Crusade, all the 9 yards. You can imagine that it's an extracurricular activities. These are things you have to reflect upon. They are not just things that you push by the side. You can bring them to fore and they can help in your application, okay?
Yeah.
Typical example. All right. Okay, so I know you've been here, and have you participated in any church activities? I mean, as a Deeper Life girl, you are expected by default, right? But have you participated in church activities or fellowship activities, spiritual development activities since you've been here?
Yeah, one major thing I've been involved in is on campus. I joined a Christian fellowship during my first year, and I've been attending it throughout. And I joined the fellowship's executive board, I think in 2022. So that's one thing I've been involved in.
Okay. Well, I mean, an average Deeper Life person is a pastor, right? So, what impact do you think that fellowship process and being active as part of the body of Christ, what impact has it made in your life, or what difference have you seen in yourself prior to coming here and now that you're a senior about to graduate?
I think it's been definitely good because it's helped ground me, and it's always just nice to have a family of believers, especially here where it's a new place that I've had to adjust to. And also just learning how to share my faith on campus, share it with other students, encourage other students who are in their faith, or talk to other students who are of different faiths about the Bible, about God. And I think it's been very challenging sometimes, but it's been a good experience.
Okay. I like that you bring that point up, because sharing the word of God here in the US is a little bit different from the way we were taught back home. I mean, like, it's not like the Bible's changed. It's just the landscape is different. Understanding levels are different. So being able to immerse yourself in that process and in that capacity is very, very important. And I think I appreciate that. All right. Okay. So final tip of advice. What would you give as an advice to anyone? Because there's some people who are going to watch this and they're like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to start. What am I going to do? What would be your 2-3 tips of advice for them to be able to come out on a full ride scholarship, just like you did?
I'll say the first thing is to ask questions, like actively seek out people who have been involved in this process. You can, if you don't know somebody physically or in person, you can reach out to other people, like on LinkedIn and so on, like try to ask people what their process was, what they did to get there, and also use the free resources that are out there on the internet. There's a lot more out there than people realize.
Okay.
And also just to talk to, if you're in the application process and all of that, just to talk to other people who are doing the same thing, and also just other people to brainstorm, because like I mentioned, I struggled a lot with thinking of things to put in my applications because I thought I didn't have anything. But the more I talked to people, the more I realized that I actually had a lot to talk about.
Okay. All right. Now, so we have a mantra for 2024. So I'm doing these interviews as we begin to wrap this interview to a close. And what is our mantra? You've forgotten?
Just remember.
So we have a just do it mantra. So for 2024, our mantra is just do it. Now stop sleeping on opportunities. Stop procrastinating till tomorrow. The application season is currently ongoing. All right. So if you think you might be late for this application season, you can begin to prepare for the next application season that will start in fall of this year. But if you're going through the application season, our prayers are with you. We're praying that you would get your dreams. All right. Are you on any form of social media for now?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn, Natasha Mulenga.
Okay, so I'm going to link her LinkedIn down in the description, and then you can reach out to her if you have any questions, need clarification. And for me, my Instagram is going to be down there, and that is where I'm thinking everyone can easily get to me. That's social media I look at a lot. Okay, and so for me, as far as you're praying, as far as you're keeping persistent to what you want to do, then you can see that the sky really is your starting point. So have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time.